Hello and welcome to NLP Summit 2020. I'm very excited to be here today and talk to you about how Freshworks Freddy AI leverages natural language processing to deliver ethics-first customer experiences at scale. My name is Peter Stadlinger. I'm the head of product for Freshworks CRM. Very excited to be here today and share with you some of the best practices, some of the learnings, some of the new approaches that we use when it comes to natural language processing, and very excited to spend the next 20 to 30 minutes with you. With that said, let's introduce the problem a little bit. I think we live in interesting times, and as such, there's a lot of scrutiny around any kind of technology that we use, any kind of new, like I said, technology trends that we introduce, such as NLP. And when you look at, I would say some of the recent headlines that we've seen is, it kind of tells you exactly what the problem is, whether it's Twitter's photo preview problem from a few weeks ago, or even Zoom's problem of making someone's head disappear. It makes it pretty clear what the problem is, which means that certain people within our society are not treated the same way by the technology that is available. And then we who are responsible for building such technologies are responsible to really think it through and make sure that things like that do not happen. The purpose of today's session is to kind of propose and to show a path to how it can be done differently. And like I said, Freshworks is interesting in a sense that it always kind of rethinks and reevaluates how software is being developed. And as such, with no surprise, when it comes to NLP, Freshworks is also kind of trailblazing and taking the lead in terms of how to build ethics-first AI, specifically NLP products. Quick introductions. I'm originally from Germany, in case you haven't noticed yet from my accent. As of a couple of years ago, I'm an American citizen. Very, very proud to say that. I studied computer science back in Germany at the KIT. Spent a lot of time developing Java as a software developer, and then made my way into Adobe as a product manager and product leader. Very, very exciting years at Adobe, where we were able to look at all the different use cases when it comes to creating customer experiences, but also at various types of technologies that were just emerging at that time. And as I was basically then looking for new opportunities, I joined Salesforce Einstein. And Salesforce Einstein was very, very interesting because I was able to see firsthand what are some of the opportunities and what are some of the challenges that a big company and big technology company like Salesforce has when it comes to developing AI and machine learning. And after these amazing years at both Adobe and Salesforce, I eventually then joined Freshworks as the head of product, and really believe that we at Freshworks have the unique ability to rewrite and rewire a lot of the technologies that we've seen in the last decade or so, and to take tongue-in-cheek a fresh approach to building software, and more specifically a fresh approach to AI and NLP as we use them to create customer experiences. Maybe a quick comment on Freshworks. Now, a lot of you might actually know who Freshworks or what Freshworks is. Freshworks is arguably one of the biggest, I would say, rocket ships in the startup world. When you look at Forbes Cloud 100, you can see that they have us at position 16. And when you look at the positions over the years, you will see that the progress has been tremendous, and it's phenomenal to be part of such a journey. There's so much growth, so much opportunity, and you can see that a lot of the software that we're building resonates with the market, and in many ways the market kind of waited for someone to kind of come and have a fresh approach to building enterprise or business software. Another very exciting picture that I can't help sharing is when we were featured at NASDAQ. Very, very proud to see that kind of recognition, because like I said, the brand might not be as familiar to a lot of people here in the States, but like I said, it is truly a rocket ship, and if you haven't heard about them, you will definitely hear from us in the near future. Today's core message is very simple, right? When it comes to machine learning and NLP, it's very simple, yet very hard to remind yourself that you need to focus on the fundamentals. And the core message, in other words, is if you can get the basics right, if you just focus on what matters to machine learning and NLP. The rest will follow. And that is, like I said, technically simple, but when it comes to applying it to your day-to-day business, very, very hard. The three key takeaways is that number one, focus on training data. Second of all, ethics first is not something that you do for the sake of being ethics first, but it actually yields better results. And thirdly, when you think about reducing bias, and when you think about employing an ethics first approach, don't be surprised that this is like an ongoing effort. Like, we will never be able to eliminate bias, but we should all strive to really reduce it and minimize it. And I think that's the three key takeaway here is that bias reduction never stops. It's an ongoing effort. And but at the same time, as we kind of iterate and are able to minimize it, we can truly make a difference for a lot of people and for us as a society. Here's a quick introduction, or like a quick agenda in terms of what we'll talk about today. Is we kind of, after kind of framing, introducing the problem, we'll talk about like, why does ethics first matter? And then we'll look at how to apply such an approach, and then we'll do a quick recap and see what next steps you can take to kind of follow that same approach. So why does ethics first matter? Before we get into that, it's important to kind of remind everyone that in many cases, or like in many ways, 20% of the things that we do are responsible for 80% of the results, and vice versa. 80% of the results, or like 80% of our effort, are responsible for 20% of the results. It's the same thing for machine learning, AI, and NLP in many ways. At least that's my experience. Is that 80%, or like even 90% of your effort should be on probably the model. But to no one's surprise, that amount of effort doesn't necessarily translate in better and more accurate predictions, because the model is, like I said, only about 20% of the overall output. From my experience, the most important thing that you should focus on is the training data. And like I said, that's one of the key takeaways from today's session, is if you do not have good training data, the predictions and the output won't be accurate and won't be relevant. So do not make the mistake of just jumping to the arguably more fun piece, or like more fun part, which is to develop the model, but really get the training data right, and figure out what training data you need in order to train the kind of model that you need. And like I said, a lot of people kind of skip that step, and there is no skipping when it comes to NLP, let alone for machine learning. So get the training data right, because it does represent 80% of the accuracy of any kind of predictions you have. And I'm not saying this just to kind of tell you to focus on training data for no purpose. It's actually the reality. When you look at what data we have available in 2020, it's actually really, really hard. A lot of people are under the assumption that there is a lot of data out there, but it's only true for pre-AI data. That's like what I call. Pre-AI data is basically data that you've collected before you even knew that you would eventually use it to train a machine learning model. And it's almost like circumstantial, and it's not intentional. And if it's not intentional, that means that the data is oftentimes irrelevant and can't really be used to make any kind of prediction that really matters. Secondly, you've probably heard the industry term of a CDP, stands for Customer Data Platform. The whole purpose of a CDP is to bring data together from different parts of an organization, different parts of tools. And even if you didn't have the problem of having collected data that's from a pre-AI world, you wouldn't be able to even reason across it. You wouldn't be able to like learn across these different data sets and do proper feature engineering without access to a system that allows you to do that. So that's like the second big challenge, and just shows you some of the reasons why it's actually really hard to have access to good training data. Thirdly, a lot of the data that you have, and it's like tied to a CDP, use different data models. That means being able to kind of stitch together and bring it together is really hard. Because even though it's maybe related data, you can't really do that easily, because it's in the wrong structure and in the wrong format. And thirdly, when we look at a lot of the regulations which are necessary, when you look at GDPR, when you look at CCPA, these are all things that contribute to all the challenges that we have when it comes to collecting and having the right training data that you need to train your NLP and machine learning models. And what's the result? The result is obviously that when people do not have what they need, or like what they actually what would be required, they use what's available, and then the end result is just like bad or NLP or ML that doesn't work. Like you can't just like pick and choose from those features that are available just because they're available. Instead, like I said, you have like to really approach this with the intent of understanding what data you need to collect in order to make the predictions that you're trying to do. In a nutshell, here's a statement that I really like when it comes to what is good training data. It's actually very simple. It's about having ample and diverse data sets. Ample, I like ample because a lot of people always believe that it's about having a lot of data. That is true, but it's not that you need like some crazy amount of data in order to train machine learning models. Instead, you need enough data to do that. And then the second piece is where people oftentimes forget is the diversity. Like when you want to create entropy, when you need to basically provide your data science teams with even the possibility of looking at different options, different features, you need to provide them like a nice diverse data set that has different dimensions, different ways to look at the problem. And if you just give them like one dimension or two dimensions, that's not going to work, like because they'll be cornered into picking from the data that's available. And the key takeaway here is that when you think about collecting and gathering training data, don't forget that it's about the diversity, and then maybe second about the quantity. People always like kind of get it wrong by focusing on the quantity first and then go after a diverse training data set, but it's actually the opposite. Focus on the diversity first and then go for quantity. That said, what's the question that we're trying to answer is, why does ethics first matter in AI? And I think now that we've kind of introduced the problem, or kind of looked at it in a little more detail, it should be easy to answer. It actually helps you build better AI products because you have a better training data set. It's not only ample, but it's also diverse. And that means you will be able to do better feature engineering and come to a point where you can then train a model that is truly predictive and truly accurate in a sense. And then second of all, I think we all want to do the right thing, and no one would argue with the fact that using this ethics first approach, especially since it's actually better, it shouldn't be something that everyone should employ. It's the right thing to do. It helps people, makes us a better society, and very excited to be part of a company that kind of thinks about these things the same way. Now let's look at how to apply an ethics AI, like ethics first approach to your organization. So the latest status, and like I said, like technology obviously changes very fastly and rapidly. So that means in a year or 2 years from now, when we rewatch this presentation, people might think like, how basic are the things that we talked about back then? But I would say for the next 2 to 3 years, the focus is going to be in these 3 areas. So when you think about building NLP products and machine learning products, there are basically 3 big buckets, or like 3 big categories that you can focus on. The first one is obviously the labeling process, right? So who's labeling it? When are they labeling it? Where are they labeling it? What tools are they using to label it? All of these considerations should be taken account. And we think about labeling the same way. Like that means that the agents or the people that actually label data have to come from different backgrounds and be diverse in nature, as opposed to just like having people from one location or one language or with one cultural background. So it's really important to already think about the labeling process, because even or like as early as during the labeling process, can you introduce bias and create problems down the line? So oftentimes, I think in technology or in life, the problems that you kind of introduce upfront can't really be fixed downstream. So really be careful about the labeling process that you're putting together, because here, in my opinion, most people create the biggest problems. Secondly, when you think about the labels that are being made available to the labelers, that's the second biggest problem that you can create, is if you're skewed towards certain labels, and if you yourself are picking and choosing these labels, you will probably introduce bias. And instead, the best way to do that is to actually engage with those people that will actually use the predictions and use the NLP products, to get immediate feedback from those people who should then also be diverse, right? So you can do nice surveys. You can actually do just like a open forum where you ask people like, what kind of labels would you use to describe a certain problem that you're trying to solve, as opposed to kind of leading with certain labels that you had in mind. So the problem is oftentimes that whoever's building the product is kind of introducing bias, and their own bias. It's because it's their view of the world. And instead, it's important to have this kind of customer-centric and end-user type of mindset that allows you to kind of source labels that come directly from those people that will benefit from the products that you build. And then lastly but not least, it's the feedback loop. I think as we build NLP products, it's critical that if you get the labeling process right, if you get the labels right, it's important to kind of iterate on all of these pieces and make sure that the model that is being trained on is being measured for bias. That's, I think, a lot of different frameworks out there that allows you to do that. And you can then actually build a nice feedback loop that as you're feeding the model with the right training data to kind of measure how the bias is either hopefully going down or up. And if it's going up, then of course you have to like revisit the pieces that we just talked about and make sure that input is right. Because as I said, the core message here is if you get the basics right, which in our case is the training data, you will, the rest will follow. What are some of the ways to get access to better training data sets? I think something that's been very, very popular in recent years is synthetic data. I'm not a big fan of it, even though it's sometimes like a necessary evil, if you will, in order to make some sort of progress. And I think the example here that I have is that the original Eiffel Tower can never be the same as, let's say, the Eiffel Tower in Vegas or in other places of the world. So synthetic data gets you only to a certain point, and then beyond that, you will eventually have to figure out ways how to collect more granular data. And I think that's the option 2 that I prefer. Option 2 is to basically rethink and update and upgrade oftentimes the user interface that you provide as a vendor to allow employees, users, you name it, to kind of give you the type of granular data that you need. And you should do it in a way that doesn't distract them. So let's say when we build a business software, or let's say in our case, we built CRM software, you want to be able to allow account executives to easily provide you with feedback and to share some of their views with you in an easy, seamless way. And that's often through the user interface. And with that said, this is actually probably arguably a statement that encapsulates what I just said in the best way, is that even, or especially for small data problems in NLP, in my opinion, the only way that can be solved is by enabling businesses to gather the right data. And the right data means it has to be more granular, it has to be relevant for the use case that you're trying to solve. It shouldn't be data that you collected many, many years ago, or that you started collecting many years ago, as I said, in a pre-AI world, and it has to happen in a seamless way. That means if your tool set does not allow you to easily incorporate these little queries, little surveys that allow users to give feedback on various aspects, you won't be able to get there. It has to be integrated, it has to be part of the flow, it has to feel seamless, and otherwise it's not gonna work. And therefore, I think my opinion is that that the user interface has clearly become the new battleground for AI and NLP, because unless you can easily iterate on the UI, you won't be able to, like I said, collect the training data that you need. Let's look at some of the examples that we've worked on. let's say the first use case is very, very typical. And for those who are not familiar with CRMs, or like with Salesforce automation, like a very typical use case is pipeline management. So how do you allow leadership to understand and predict how likely it is that certain deals will close? So in this case, it's a very, very straightforward use case. And I picked it to kind of illustrate it a little bit easier. Is for each deal that comes in, we were able to collect training data from account executives for each organizations and kind of weigh their opinion. And the way we did that, like I said, is that every time they logged into our tool, we basically allowed them to kind of rate and indicate how likely they think a given deal is to close. And like I said, over time, you will get the right data, especially because it's diverse in nature. And it really doesn't matter that you don't have that much data, because over time, you will have a big enough data set that will allow you to then train a proper data set, or like a proper model. And the point that I'm trying to make is to kind of remind you again of the basics, is that a training, or like a good training data, is ample and diverse in nature. We took care of the diversity first, and the quantity will eventually follow. And like I said, it typically doesn't take that long, even for smaller organizations, to collect the right type of data. Now let's look at a more NLP-centric use case. Is, let's say, when it comes to digital marketing, or when it comes to email marketing, and when you think about how to detect and predict how a certain email or marketing message might resonate with end users. I think the mistake that a lot of people make is that they kind of approach it with labels that they have in mind. They have often like very, very narrow and very small set of labels that they want to use. So in our case, and this is just like a snapshot of labels, we used basically like a focus group where we kind of went through multiple iterations of figuring out how do different, let's say, people in different communities think about how they feel about marketing language. And like I said, this is only like a snapshot. In the end, we had like over 1,000 different labels to choose from. And obviously those were then specific to different communities and different geos that we have and that we have to serve. And that's where you really become an ethics first and really all-encompassing, all-including type of technology company, because not only, like I said, it's the better product, but also it's doing the right thing, because people that receive emails will then be able to, like, we will allow marketers to really make them understand like how end users think about the marketing messages that they receive. With that said, let's do a quick recap and think about like what you can take away from today's session is number one, the core message. And I can repeat myself enough, get the basics right, and the rest will follow. And we talked about what that is. The basics is, and maybe basics is, maybe fundamentals is the better word. Get the fundamentals right, and the fundamentals is a training data set that's relevant. And a training data set that's relevant means that it's big enough, which means it doesn't have to be tremendously big enough, and more importantly, it has to be diverse in nature. And if you can collect that data, you will allow people downstream to help you build the right system. And like I said, picking and choosing a model is hard enough, but like I said, it is more important to like focus on the training data set, and those are like arguably the first takeaway here from today's session is focus on the training data. If you do so, and if you make sure that the training data set is like labeled correctly, that you use labels that are sourced from different geos and different groups, different communities, you will be able to like introduce like higher entropy, and that all will then allow you to like yield better results. Because like I said, ethics first is not for the purpose of being ethics or ethical, or like for the purpose of, for the sake of it, but it is, as I said, giving you better products. It helps you to compete in the marketplace, and helps you outperform anyone you're competing with. And last but not least, it's the right thing. Last but not least is reducing bias never stops. That means it's never about eliminating bias. It's all about reducing it. And therefore, structure and introduce processes that allow you to do that as an ongoing project. We've done this a long time ago, and the results that we are seeing speak for themselves. With that said, we will then think about how we can help you. I will be part of the live Q&A with some very interesting steps that you can take to kind of start that journey in case you don't have that. Like I said, reach out to me on Twitter, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Here's my email address in case you want to contact me directly. So I'm very excited to work with anyone in the community on introducing like this ethics first approach to building NLP products. And like I said, it's phenomenal in terms of what the results can be if you actually do that. And with that, thank you so much for listening. I've had the tremendous pleasure of being here today. It was a lot of fun to put together the content and to kind of share with you a little bit how we at Freshworks think about NLP and how we think about using an ethics first approach to it. Thank you so much.